It's a show time.
Hello honeys, Shibuki Ran is the key to many Starlight Academy secrets, so I have put together all of her experiences and motivations. This is a thorough deep dive containing spoilers for the entire original series, including the 10th anniversary film, Starway to the Future. If that's okay with you, let's get started. Ron's backstory is a puzzle. I'm going to set out all of the pieces for us so it's clear what is canon, but I'll have to take some liberties when putting them together into a full picture. Any specific interpretation of her backstory can change her character a lot, so I'll try to keep the speculation to a minimum. That said, I bet you didn't know that Starlight Academy canonically has an elementary school. That's right, it's not a plot hole that Ron is shown attending Mizuki's first year performances. According to the Aikatsu official guidebook, Starlight Academy's vast grounds include school buildings from elementary to high school. So when Ron says that she's been competing against Hikari in the sensational student audition for years, she's being literal. The Aikatsu official guidebook also describes both Hikari and Ron's previous roommate Mako as being involved with Ron at Starlight Academy since elementary school. Ron has also canonically been working since she was born, 13 years by the time she's 13 in her first year of middle school. That's a detail confirmed both in the show by Aoi and in the text in the Aikatsu official guidebook. The guidebook and Aoi also claim that she started out in acting before starting work as a model. Ron is close with her grandmother but has no other confirmed family members. She is a proficient swimmer and martial artist and used to be more androgynous before she discovered spicy agaha in her third year of elementary school. Those are the broad strokes of her canon backstory, so if we want to understand where she goes from there, we have to start painting our own picture of her. Similar to Mizuki, we never find out why Ron's family introduced her to the entertainment industry. From the time that she was less than a year old, we know that she was working in TV or film as an actress. When she was little, her family would gather at her grandmother's house for New Year's, and for whatever reason, Ron became especially attached to her grandmother. Even though she'd been working her whole life, Ron only starts remembering it once she starts at Starlight Academy for her first year of school. Her family likely enrolls her there so that she can continue to receive a flexible education between her work. Ron never expresses any passion for this decision, so it's easy to assume that her early career was mostly driven by her family's wishes for her. Young Ron is a tomboy. She has short hair, is often mistaken for a boy, and some of her first modeling jobs are for boys' clothing. We don't know if Ron stayed in the dorms or not at this point. Elementary or primary boarding schools do exist, but they're very rare. Regardless, Ron makes at least one friend while she's at school, Kondo Mako. Mako is very similar to Ron. They both have short hair, work modeling jobs, and start dreaming of rising in the industry together. They're paired up so often for work that Ron develops a lifelong habit of matching her steps to Mako's. And as Ron becomes more successful in modeling, her fashion show and photo shoot work replace her acting gigs. At some point, Ron also trains extensively in swimming and martial arts. Starlight Academy has an indoor swimming pool and teaches traditional arts like tea ceremony. It'd be fitting for them to teach traditional martial arts as well. And with Ron's tomboyish image, it's easy to imagine her really enjoying those lessons. But that image changes around her third year of elementary school. She's introduced to Spicy Agaha, a prolific fashion brand, and falls in love with it. So much so that she begins to model her entire identity around its style. I wanted to change to become a person who befits those clothes, she later says. And this is where we can imagine Hikari and Ron's grandmother probably fit in. Minoa Hikari is another student confirmed by the anime and the official guidebook to have attended Starlight Academy's elementary school. The guidebook also confirms that her favorite brand is Spicy Agaha. Because of this preference, she quickly becomes a rival to Ron. Every year, elementary school students are able to enter the sensational student audition, where the school's headmistress chooses the most successful student in every grade. Hikari wins this audition multiple times. We don't know exactly how many times or when she got to Starlight, but it's enough to frustrate Ron. Ron never wins a single audition against Hikari in elementary school. And rather than giving them a common interest, Ron's new love of Spicy Agaha only intensifies their rivalry. Ron makes several mentions of being burned by Hikari, implying that she has either witnessed or personally experienced some kind of harm from being close with Hikari. And in Ron's mind, Hikari's haughty attitude becomes a huge red flag. Still, Hikari is successful and praised by the headmistress herself, so Ron has to respect her drive. She has to emulate some of Hikari's passion if she ever wants to earn the approval of Spicy Agaha and her school. So when she spends time with her grandmother, she picks up every lesson she can from the adults she feels closest with. And, intentionally or not, Ron's grandmother shapes a significant portion of her new identity. Ron's grandmother only makes her healthy meals because she sees proper nutrition as an important expression of care. She is firm in those values and acts in strict accordance to what she thinks is best. So Ron follows her lead. It manifests as a preference for healthy foods at first, but Ron becomes strict about anything she thinks is important. Whether it's for her own benefit or a friend's, Ron begins to express care through her own firm value system, and it's through strict training that she tries to change. No matter how much Ron tries to transform herself though, she still can't beat Hikari. And by the time she's in her 6th and final year of elementary school, the bar is raised even higher by the debut of Kanzaki Mizuki. Mizuki is a brand new first-year middle school student, and Ron is in the audience when she stuns the world with her brilliant Fresh Girls Cup performance. Mizuki quickly takes over, becoming the most talented and successful idol in Japan in one short year. Ron finally enters the middle school dorms as a completely changed person. She is focused, determined, professional, and a highly experienced model. Her goal is still Spicy Agaha, her undefeated rival is Hikari, her new role model is Mizuki, and her best friend is Mako. She and Mako become roommates and promise to keep rising together. But only a couple of months later, after they both lose to Mizuki in that year's Fresh Girls Cup, Mako drops out. The competition has become too intense for her, and she leaves Starlight Academy after years of working toward their shared dream. Mako's departure crushes Ron. Ron has become a star of the rising generation, but Mako worked just as hard as she did. Mako was right there by her side when she started modeling, and they had been a great team. It makes Ron's success feel almost arbitrary. It was unfair that Mako struggled so much while Ron succeeded. She reminds herself that trying your best doesn't ensure passing, and tries to frame their dream of rising together as unrealistic. But it doesn't stop her from feeling guilty. I always told myself that there was nothing I could have done about it, she later says, clearly regretting the loss of her friend. Luckily, Ron has the support of her school in coping with this loss. While she's still recovering from Mako's departure, her teacher Johnny introduces her to Spicy Agaha's top designer, Tachibana Anna. He explains that she was once a model too, and Ron is starstruck. Johnny pushes Ron to talk to her, and she gives it a shot. "I'll fly," she promises Anna. "I love Spicy Agaha clothes, so I'll definitely fly up on the stage just like an Agaha." Anna just smiles at her and walks away. So when Ron later wins an audition to wear Spicy Agaha in a fashion show, she puts everything she has into her performance. She even imagines Anna sitting right in front of her. After the show, it turns out that Anna had been watching after all. The top designer of her favorite brand sends her a personal message along with the brand new Spicy Agaha outfit. "You can surely fly even higher," the message reads, and Ron becomes even more determined to overcome the loss of her friend. If not even her childhood friendship with Mako could survive Starlight Academy's harsh competitive atmosphere, Ron decides that no friendship is worth another heartbreak. It all starts to seem like one big distraction. Her goal is to work with Spicy Agaha, and she's sick of losing to Hikari, so why waste her time on anyone else? To make matters worse, many of Ron's classmates are brand new Starlight Academy students. Most of them start in middle school, and only a few are carried over from her elementary classes. So the lessons all feel extremely basic, boring even. Ron skips a lot of the extra sessions that are offered, assuming that her own individual training must be far beyond what the beginners are doing there. Because of this, Ron quickly develops a rather harsh reputation. When she does have to work with her classmates, they tend to shrink under her gaze, and when she tries to help them, they react as if she were scolding them. So she doesn't even speak to the girl who sits next to her on most days, and she resigns herself to doing as much as possible on her own. It's easier that way. Ron works alone through the spring and summer, and come fall, a transfer exam catches her attention. Even more new students will soon pour into the middle school, taking the place of those like Mako, who have already given up on their dreams. Ron can't help being a little curious. She watches the results announcement in the school foyer, and two girls catch her eye. They seem like friends, and they bounce around hugging each other when the results are posted. Ron assumes that they must have gotten accepted together, and doesn't want to watch anymore. Those two girls end up in Ron's class, and as much as she wants to ignore them, she finds them a little unsettling. Being transfer students, they're even fresher than her other classmates, and they idolize Mizuki, just like everyone else. They remind Ron of herself and Mako when they still talked about their futures as idols, when all it took was hard work and dreams. Having these two girls in her class starts to seem like a daily reminder of everything she's lost. A part of her knows that they're bound to struggle and fail eventually, but another part feels drawn to them, like they're the ghosts of her own past. Ron does her best to keep her distance, but her curiosity still gets the better of her. She hears her new classmates singing together in their room one night and stops to listen at the door. She remembers singing in the same way with Mako, and listening to them brings up a lot of memories. Almost enough to convince her that these two girls could have a chance of making it together. But she catches herself and forces the thought back. Mako spent years staying with her like that, and she's still gone. Ron's haunting becomes even more invasive when her new classmates take an interest in her for some reason. She's looking through audition postings when they start staring at her in the foyer. Then they're talking about her and approaching her. They introduce themselves as Hoshimiya Ichigo and Kiriya Aoi, and Ron decides in that moment that she really doesn't like them. In fact, she wants them as far away from her as possible. Ichigo and Aoi treat her like a senior and ask her for advice, so Ron answers them bluntly. Be careful not to disappear together, she tells them, and walks away. She tries to ignore them all day, but they keep watching her, and following her, so she finally snaps at them during a lesson. After that, they leave her alone. At least until she gets paired up with Ichigo for a class assignment, a fashion show audition. The best she can do at that point is keep her composure. As much as Ron would like to focus on bigger and better opportunities, the fashion show audition weighs on her mind, especially when she catches Ichigo and Aoi practicing for it outside the dorms. When she gets back to her room, she thinks about how Mako used to help her practice in the exact same way years and years ago. She tries to remind herself of what happened to Mako to snap out of her nostalgia and does her best to refocus. The next morning is the audition, and Ron doesn't bother talking to Ichigo beforehand. There's no point if she's just going to get scared like everyone else. However, Ron's a little impressed when Ichigo stops practicing long enough to say that they should give it their all together. That's at least a good attitude to go in with. But then Ichigo starts rambling about her dreams, and Ron realizes that she'll probably need to snap her out of it if they stand any real chance of passing. Ichigo is clearly in over her head, and she needs to at least learn the basics of the audition process before they perform together. So she starts explaining what a runway is, and is about to lay out the fundamentals of professionalism when Ichigo gets upset and runs out of the room. This is what Ron had been avoiding, and now she really has to do something if she wanted them to have any chance of passing. Ron follows Ichigo outside and decides to show her what she's talking about instead. She takes her backstage, and once Ichigo sees all the staff working hard, she finally listens properly. Ron explains what their work means to the staff as well as their fans, and how important it is that they take their responsibility seriously. Ichigo finally gets it, and Ron can focus on her own performance again. After the audition, Headmistress Orihime calls the two of them into her office to tell them their result. Somehow they passed, and Orihime assumes that they must have practiced together. Ron doesn't hesitate to correct her, and she gives Ichigo the credit of having some natural talent. She even pokes a little fun at her and is amused by Ichigo's earnest response. When Orihime praises Ron for getting over Mako, Ron smiles and agrees with her, even though she's not so sure she'll ever be over her best friend. When Ichigo asks her about it after the meeting, Ron decides to explain. She might as well if Orihime already let it slip. Ron tells Ichigo about Mako and then surprises herself by opening up some more. The way Mako cried back then has been bothering me ever since, she admits, before explaining just how much she and Mako have been through together. And as she reflects, a new thought occurs to her. You stepped forward with a different foot than I did, but even so, our feelings remained in sync. Even if what we do is different, it doesn't mean that we can't feel the same. Needing more time to process this idea, Ron says goodbye to Ichigo and tries to leave before she can respond. But to her surprise, Ichigo stops her and thanks her for helping her pass the audition. You shared all of your feelings with me, Ichigo says, and Ron is confused. All I did was state the obvious, she clarifies. You were the one who took flight from the runway. Ichigo lets her leave then, and Ron has a lot to think about. Ichigo and Aoi make Ron uncomfortable. That much is obvious. They are naive, immature, inexperienced, and probably headed for disaster. Watching them was like watching her younger self, and it was torture. But Ichigo did subvert a lot of her expectations. She showed up to the audition ready to practice until the last minute, and even though she wasn't the best listener, she did eventually absorb what Ron was trying to tell her. She turned out to be talented enough to pass the audition and even recognized that Ron was trying to help her and thanked her for it. That was more than most people could do. And even after all of that, Ichigo still didn't take credit for the win. She was humble and diligent, and Ron was starting to feel like there might be hope for her. Even if she still has a long way to go, maybe Ichigo has what it takes to make it in the industry. Against her better judgment, Ron decides to give in to her curiosity. She decides to try making some friends. The only problem is that she's not completely sold on Aoi yet, and both she and Ichigo turn out to be even more rambunctious than Ron had expected. Even though Ron makes the decision to befriend Ichigo and Aoi, they still act incredibly weird around her. They approach her again, but only to ask for help with their training. Ron is insulted that they have such a shallow interest in her, so she tries to reject them. But Ichigo praises her and asks really nicely, so Ron gives in. And if it's just training they want help with, she decides to put her friendship plan on hold. Ron ends up helping Ichigo and Aoi design their own signatures and somehow ends up enjoying it. The two of them listen surprisingly well, and they achieve good results, which they're thankful for. They're acting so pleasantly that Ron almost admits that she had fun with them too. But as soon as she realizes that she'd gotten carried away, she rushes back to her room in embarrassment. It was supposed to be a strictly professional training session. Regardless, Ron gets roped into hanging out with the two of them for the entire next day anyway. Ichigo is trying to improve her signing speed for her complicated signature, and Aoi comes up with a ton of ridiculous training methods. At first, Ron tries to point out how unrealistic their methods are, and once they take her advice and start simpler speed drills, she ends up timing them on a stopwatch. By the end of the night, it actually feels rewarding when Ichigo accomplishes her goal. Ron gets invited to Ichigo's house the next day, and she's convinced to go along with it by the promise of a delicious and healthy lunch. But when they actually get there, it's a mess of a surprise autograph session. Ichigo and Aoi insist that she stay, even though she's not involved in the event, so she sits inside and has a chance to reflect on how she even got there. She just meant to give her needy classmates some basic training. That was it. But before she can really question things, she's distracted by how bad Ichigo is at interacting with fans. Aoi is doing fine, but Ichigo is so focused on her ridiculous signature that she's not even talking to anyone. It's embarrassing, and an insult to everyone she's ignoring. When all of her fans leave, Ron can't take it anymore and goes outside to correct her. Another fan walks up while they're talking, and Ron coaches her through it this time. It's an overdue lesson, but at least that one fan had an okay experience. And when the signing wraps up and Ichigo passes her next audition, Aoi invites Ron to visit her at her first solo job. Feeling responsible for Ichigo's progress, Ron decides to go. Aoi teases her about it, but it is nice to see that Ichigo has taken her professionalism advice to heart. After this point, Ron can't help feeling glad when Ichigo and Aoi start approaching her without any ulterior motives. It's still embarrassing to admit that she wants such rowdy people to be her friends, but she appreciates that they seek her out. Aoi is still a little weird around her when they both end up in the same audition, but Ron just assumes she's feeling competitive. And when she watches Ichigo encourage Aoi before she goes on stage, Ron gains some more respect for her. Aoi must care a lot about even the smallest opportunities. Ron makes sure to praise her for her effort after she's done and congratulates her when she wins the audition. But right when Ron starts to get comfortable with these new relationships, Hikari returns to class to challenge her for that year's sensational student audition. Ever since they'd started middle school, Hikari has spent nearly every day in the school's livestream studio. She had tons of online fans and had become extremely dedicated to growing that fan base. All of the new middle school students expected Ron to win the audition, but that's only because they'd barely seen Hikari since the school year started. Ron knows to be wary of Hikari at this point, but Ichigo and Aoi are clueless. They walk right up to her, and Ron has to go stop them. But she feels a little proud of them when they successfully confuse Hikari. Proud enough to admit that they're her friends. Hikari doesn't seem very impressed and challenges her directly before she goes back to her studio. When Ron talks with Ichigo and Aoi after that conversation, she realizes they're probably more of a distraction than a benefit to her, at least while she's preparing for the competition. She tells them that she doesn't need special beginner lessons and leaves to practice on her own. But the more she practices, the more worried she gets. It's not like her training has ever helped her beat Hikari before, and when Ichigo and Aoi find her, she expresses her frustration to them. "I can't seem to calm down. I'm always doing my best. I don't need any special lessons. I keep saying those things. It's pathetic," she says. "My usual really isn't enough. Not if I want to compete with Hikari." Somehow, Aoi and Ichigo just get excited when she tries to explain how serious the situation is, so Ron assumes that they don't get it and goes back to her room for a break. However, she's proven wrong when they leave a gift for her at her door. It's a bottle of homemade energy juice made with healthy ingredients, perfectly matching her preferences, and they've clearly tried to respect her focus if they avoided disturbing her. Their effort convinces her that they might understand her situation after all, and she invites them to hang out with her. Maybe she could use an outside perspective. Ichigo and Aoi are still pretty rambunctious, but they listen when she explains how important beating Hikari is to her goal of working with Spicy Agaha. And it's such a relief to get those feelings off of her chest that she's finally able to relax a little. She teases Ichigo, and although she hasn't found a way to win the audition, she ends up feeling more confident. Having the supportive friends gives her some fresh motivation. It'd be a shame to lose after they've tried so hard to help her. When Ron and Hikari prepare to go on stage for the audition, Hikari expresses her surprise that Ron has actually made some new friends. "To be honest, I'm surprised too," Ron admits. "This is the first time I've thought to give it my all for the friends who are rooting me on. It might be similar to how you feel for your fans." Hikari finally seems impressed. "Ron, you've changed." And Ron agrees. "You may be right." With this encouragement from her long-term rival, Ron finally has a conclusion she was looking for. Rather than technique or skill, it might just be her feelings that needed to evolve. She doesn't beat Hikari, but for the first time, they both win. And with more praise from Hikari, they agree to compete again the next year. Ron is so happy with this result that she decides to embrace Ichigo and Aoi as capable partners. The two of them rush to praise her as soon as she gets back to the dorms and ask her to coach them. Now that she's sure they aren't just using her for her experience, Ron lets herself be a little proud of how much they seem to look up to her. She agrees to coach them if they join her in an upcoming group audition, something she'd never gotten the chance to do with Mako. "I want to try fighting alongside you two as well," Ron tells them. And even though they're still teasing her, she's pleased with how serious they are about the opportunity. Ron begins training Ichigo and Aoi that night, and she gets a text from Hikari suggesting that the three of them try getting premium costumes for their next audition. "I'll definitely be watching you. Don't let me down," the message reads, and Ron gets excited. If even Hikari is looking forward to her work with Ichigo and Aoi, then she must be on the right track. Working with Ichigo and Aoi turns out to be an unexpected challenge when Ron gets to see just how close they are. They're both extremely enthusiastic and positive about just about every part of their work, and they keep expecting Ron to join in on it. She tries to focus on logistics to keep them from getting distracted, but their excitement never dies down. They keep talking about sinking their hearts, and Ron refuses to play along. Fooling around won't get them any closer to winning. All three girls end up requesting premium costume consultations from their favorite brands, and they barely get them done in time. Ron is honored to finally see Spicy Agaha's top designer, Tachibana Anna, again, and earn her approval. She gets her first premium costume on the day before the audition, and so does Aoi. Ichigo gets hers at the last possible minute on the day of, which Ron had of course advised against. But she's forced to have faith in Ichigo anyway, and she gets to talk with Aoi more while they wait for her. Ron is mentally prepared to have to go on without Ichigo when she finally gets to the venue with her premium costume, and although Ron is skeptical about whether they prepared enough, Ichigo's confidence is unshaken. "You two believed in me and waited until the last minute. If we believe in each other, we'll be fine." It's not airtight logic, but it does sound nice. Ron decides to put her concerns aside too, and goes along with their silly group cheer. Somehow, it works again. Their performance is a success, and they all end up passing the audition. Over the next couple of months, Ron, Ichigo, and Aoi befriend Hitomi, another experienced idol, and win an audition for a Christmas concert alongside her. Ron then gets a chance to try an acting audition for the first time in a while, and she's nervous about it. It's all improv, and she hasn't exactly been focused on her acting skills, so she's not surprised when she doesn't pass. Still, she keeps competing for new opportunities with her friends, and she gets another chance at acting. This time with an idol named Yurika added to their social circle. It's a group audition, and they'll need good teamwork to pass. Unfortunately, Yurika's attitude becomes a problem for Ron. They'd already been through a lot with her at this point, knowing about her attachment to her vampire persona and helping her earn the approval of her favorite brand after a scandal. But although Yurika's vampire character is interesting, Ron doesn't see why it should consume Yurika's whole life. She seems perfectly capable of gaining popularity without it. The subject of their team audition doesn't help things either. It's for a reboot of a movie that starred Headmistress Orihime when she was a member of the legendary idol duo Masquerade. Just being allowed to audition for it is a huge honor that demands their full effort. The director is even known for being extremely harsh on rookie actresses. But Yurika doesn't put aside her haughty vampire act for anyone, not even her teammates. And when she insists that she's better than the rest of them and equal to the talent of Masquerade, Ron makes a point of bringing her back to reality. However, this doesn't convince Yurika to get serious about their training. The audition is focused on action scenes, but Yurika sits out every obstacle course and jogging session. She insists that as a vampire, she can't expose herself to sunlight long enough to participate. And when Ron finally calls her out on being lazy, she gets defensive. Training? Teamwork? That sort of filthy activity is unnecessary for a being who has surpassed you lowly humans, such as myself. And just like that, Yurika claims that the sun has drained her energy and leaves practice entirely. Ron is extremely disappointed in Yurika for this. She had a lot of respect for her as a dedicated entertainer, and the training is for her own good. But it turns out that Yurika's just as stubborn and arrogant as Hikari had been. And when the audition finally arrives, Ron is more intent on proving Yurika wrong than working with her. If Yurika were to pass without even trying, it only encouraged her to keep fooling around with her character. Sure enough, Yurika struggles through the action scenes, and as much as Ron thinks she deserves to fail, she had a good reason for insisting that Yurika train with them. Ron cares about whether her friends get hurt, especially since she's so much more experienced than most of them. If she knows how to avoid an injury, an embarrassment, or a loss, she has an obligation to share that knowledge. It's the right thing to do. So when Yurika gets herself into trouble, nearly getting hurt and nearly failing the audition, Ron can't help jumping into action. She's not happy about it, but it's her responsibility to make sure that her teammates get back to school in one piece. It's only at the end of the audition that Ron realizes that she's been so focused on Yurika that she's probably ruined her own chances of passing. Ichigo and Hitomi pass instead, and Ron has to accept the fact that this acting opportunity also wasn't meant to be. Ron soon gets back into her own element when a Spicy Agaha audition arrives. It's a competition to become a representative model for the brand, and Ron feels confident that she'll be able to win. Hikari isn't entering, so that just leaves one obstacle, a third-year student named Emma. Emma is a famous stylist and idol, but Ron believes that her own passion for spicy agaha is stronger. She even has the full support of her friends, Eureka included. But after she performs in the audition, Emma is still the one to get a standing ovation from head designer Anna. It's a tough reality check. Headmistress Orihime even finds Ron afterwards to deliver a message from Anna. What I'm searching for is not perfection, but a muse. You mustn't chase after me. Orihime tells her to think carefully about why she wasn't chosen, but Ron is confused. Orihime had said she'd been perfect, which meant she'd been as good as she could possibly be. This muse criteria was new to her, and it seemed like Emma was the one who fit it best. In order to understand how she'd ended up so far off track, Ron decides to focus on more intensive training until she reaches Emma's level. And if that happens to mean skipping the graduation fashion show where Emma will be watching her in the audience, that's a sacrifice Ron is happy to make. But she's only just started to exhaust herself with practice when Headmistress Orihime finds her and criticizes her methods. When I look at you, I can't see a speck of enjoyment in your expression. Ron is shocked, but has no way to defend herself. Orihime brings Ron to Emma's classroom, which is decorated with portraits of her and her classmates. They're objectively impressive, but Orihime points out another detail. Everyone's having fun, don't you think so? Sensing where this is going, Ron sheepishly agrees. Orihime explains that Emma styled every photo shoot herself and implies that she's behind her class's fashionable reputation. Not only that, but she's even inspired multiple fashion designers. Ron is stunned by her influence. If you want to continue working as a model, Orihime explains, then you must understand the true meaning of being a muse. Artists and designers are, after all, only human. If something stimulates or influences them, then they'll give birth to a new work of art. Aren't you the same? Orihime compares Ron's influence over her friend's training to Emma's influence over Tachibana Anna, and Ron starts to understand. So it had been Emma's perspective as well as her passion that had allowed her to win. If that was the case, then no amount of training could make them equals. Instead, it becomes clear to Ron that her path towards spicy agaha will have to be unique. And if there really are no criteria to meet except inspiration and diligence, then it's up to her to find her own perspective. If she and Anna are truly meant to work together, then one day Anna will find a reason to chase after her, just like she's decided to chase after Emma now. As a sign of encouragement, Orihime gives Ron a new premium costume sent from Anna herself. She said to give them to you once you smiled again, Orihime praises, but Ron's smile quickly turns serious. There's still something weighing on her mind. The graduation fashion show is that day, and it might be Ron's last chance to see Emma. Rather than stewing in her jealousy, Ron allows herself to be inspired instead. She hurries back to the dorm to prepare a set of costumes for her friends in the fashion show, and even though she gets to the venue at the last minute, they're all still waiting for her. They'd never doubted that she'd make it to the performance. Let's show our seniors just how good we can look, Ron tells them. I want to show them how amazing the underclassmen they're leaving behind are. The fashion show is a big success, and Ron is incredibly proud of how well it all came together. Afterwards, she hurries to say goodbye to Emma, where Ron presents her with a bouquet of flowers. I promise I'll make it to the same stage as you one day, and one day I'll surpass you, Ron says. Emma has nothing but encouragement for her. Then come on up, I'll be waiting for you. And just like that, Ron has a new goal to aim for. During an outing for spring break, Ron gets a chance to reflect on her progress with Aoi. Aoi points out how the sun is like a top idol shining so brightly that the rest of the stars are obscured, and Ron finds a piece of her new perspective. Then I think being a cloud would be fine, she muses. You may not be as high up as the stars, but you can appeal to the fact that you're always here. With this idea as her new foundation, Ron begins to move away from her lifetime of competition and rivalry. Instead, she starts to imagine a more consistent kind of progress. Progress that comes from consistent daily effort, not brief flashes of brilliance. Change takes time though, and Ron isn't completely sure how to make the best use of her new mindset. The first test of it comes with the Fresh Girls Cup, a school competition to challenge Mizuki. It's not a formal challenge, beating her won't make you the top idol, but it's still important to prove yourself to her. Ron is as firm in her training as ever, and she gets through the first round alongside Ichigo and Aoi. But once they split up to prepare for the semifinals individually, Ron gets a little distracted. She'd always practiced on her own before, but now it feels weird. What if her friends need her help? What if she needs their help? And when the semifinals arrive, Ron fails along with Aoi. She's disappointed in herself for losing focus, but she's happy to see Ichigo move on to the finals. And she's still happy for her even when she loses to Mizuki. The important part is that they've all made progress together. It's only a month later when a new challenge arrives from Mizuki, an audition to debut in her new trio unit, TriStar. Right away, Ron recognizes that there's no way for her, Ichigo, and Aoi to aim for this goal together. She'll only choose 2 of us, Ron worries, but Ichigo reassures them with her usual confident optimism. And when Aoi agrees with her, Ron lets herself be convinced too. No matter what happens, we'll still be friends, she concludes. The entire school is eligible for Mizuki's audition, and almost every student is competing. Hikari is one of the few abstaining. She's already dedicated to her own fans. And when she challenges Ron to impress her, Ron finds some of her competitiveness again. She prepares as much as possible with her friends, and then it's time to face Mizuki's trials. The first of those trials is an absurdly difficult obstacle course, and although Ron initially has faith that it must have some important meaning, she loses that faith by the time they're singing karaoke on mechanical rodeo horses. Still, she, Ichigo, and Aoi are chosen by Mizuki to move on to the next round along with Hitomi, Sakura, and 3 other girls. They all perform for Mizuki, but she still doesn't choose any of them. And as soon as she announces that there will be one more callback round, a new competitor arrives, the American Idol, Ichinose Kaede. Kaede parachutes into the audition venue and blows everyone away with a crazy audition tape, but that doesn't make her late acceptance into the final audition round any more fair to Ron. And even though she seems perfectly nice, Ron doesn't know what to feel about her beyond a vague wariness. Kaede is an extremely talented idol, so it makes sense to consider her as a serious threat, right? Of course, Ichigo doesn't see it that way. To her, Kaede is just an exciting new student who she can't wait to get to know. And through Ichigo, Ron gets to know her as well. Ron ends up impressed by how genuine Kaede's commitment to entertainment is, and realizes that she'd gotten distracted from the same goal. Competition wasn't supposed to be the point for her anymore. It was finding her own path alongside her friends. So she decides to open herself up to Kaede after all, and they all go to the final TriStar audition on good terms. Somehow, Mizuki still can't make a final decision after they all perform. She picks Kaede, no surprise there, but Ron, Aoi, and Ichigo are all summoned for yet another callback round. They're separated into special VIP dorms the next day where their phones are confiscated. Presumably it's to make sure they focus or something. And when Ron receives a personal note from Spicy Yaga's top designer Anna along with a new costume, she decides to correct her past mistake. Rather than worrying about her friends like in the Fresh Girls Cup, she's going to trust in all of their abilities and focus on herself. They all promise to be friends no matter what after all. In a dramatic shift from the first round of the TriStar audition, this callback round is a live broadcast interview hosted by Mizuki. When Ron's turn arrives, she walks out onto a dark stage and sits in a lonely chair lit by an overhead spotlight. It faces Mizuki directly, who asks her a series of questions about her history at Starlight Academy and her personal character. We only see one of them, the final question. If you were to enter TriStar, what sort of radiance would you bring? Ron considers her answer carefully, and Mizuki prompts her with more context. As someone who has spent her entire life in this industry, you are the shining example of having an entertainment career. Ron picks up on her hint. Radiance is a vague quality, but Mizuki clearly wants her to talk about her professional skill set. To me, the stage is where I belong, Ron answers confidently. No matter who stands beside me or whom I'm paired with, even if that happens to be TriStar, Shibuki Ron will not change. Mizuki watches her intently for a second, and Ron stares back, refusing to be intimidated. That seems to work, and Mizuki dismisses her with a smile. The answer Ron gave was a reflexive one, the kind of self-promotion that had been expected of her whole life. It was also perfectly in line with her commitment to constant, consistent personal progress. But the inadequacy of her answer becomes clear when Ron is greeted by Ichigo and Aoi in the green room. They remind her that it actually does matter quite a bit who she's paired with. The 3 friends distract each other with jokes and snacks while they wait for one final performance round and try to ignore how much they'll miss each other. TriStar is already booked up for years, so this might as well be goodbye. With the support of their classmates, they give their last cover of TriStar's debut song their very best effort. And to Ron's surprise, Mizuki picks her as the group's final member. The praise starts immediately. In today's audition, Shibuki Ron once again showed her high level of professionalism. Among everyone in the academy, she alone has history to back up her ability. Mizuki goes on to explain that the strength to shine alone was the main criteria for TriStar's members, and that she found Ron to be the most capable of meeting it. For a moment, Ron feels incredibly proud of her accomplishment. But as soon as she steps off the stage and is hurried out of the venue and toward TriStar's waiting limousine, she starts looking for her friends. She can't see any of them in the crowd, and she panics when she reaches the car. She asks for a little more time and calls out to Ichigo and Aoi, risking embarrassment and her first impression on her new manager. Luckily, her best friends push their way to the front to say a proper goodbye. Suddenly, Ron is reminded of Mako. It had been so painful to lose her friend then, and the time that followed had been so lonely. Ron can barely hold back her tears as she realizes how much she's going to miss Ichigo and Aoi. But they encourage her and tell her to smile before she leaves, so all she can do is try to look on the bright side. As a new member of TriStar, Ron tries to focus on what's expected of her. She was chosen for her professionalism, her strength, and her independence. It's a huge honor, but at the same time it puts her in a tricky spot. She'd been so ready to start exploring a new path for herself, and she just started to understand how important her friends were to that exploration. But if her journey is taking her back toward her competitive roots, then she decides to give it her full effort anyway. Miyazaki picked her. That has to mean something. As Ron stands backstage before TriStar's debut concert, she feels a new kind of apprehension and tries to gather her resolve. Everyone is waiting to see TriStar's debut. Each and every one of my fans. Miyazaki, I definitely won't let you down. Today, I am reborn. And on stage, she makes a promise to the audience. I'll show you a brilliance you've never seen before. In the face of uncertainty, Ron responds with an unforgiving level of pressure. She's been given a huge responsibility to keep up with Japan's top idol, and there's no way she'd allow herself to disappoint anyone. She crushes her doubts by doubling down on her commitment to TriStar. If the old Ron is scared, she'll just remake herself into a Ron who isn't. Years of work begins early the next morning. First is a photo shoot, something Ron is perfectly comfortable with. The van full of staff members and packed schedule are both new, but Mizaki and Kaede are unfazed, so Ron follows their lead. She'll have to do her best not to cause any problems for them. Later that day, at another job, Ron is happy to see a text from Ichigo but doesn't get a chance to read it. Instead, she's given last-minute notice that TriStar will be holding another concert the next day. A huge one, in a giant stadium. That day had already shown Ron that she was far behind Mizaki and Kaede in experience, stamina, and skill. And now she has less than 24 hours before thousands of people will see that firsthand. The trio has a TV interview about the event that evening, and then they head back to a hotel with their staff. Kaede and Mizaki are pleased by the scale of their next concert, and Mizaki tells them to make the most of it, so Ron follows along with them. The least she can do is smile and agree. They start practice for the concert that night, and an hour and a half in, Ron starts to burn out. They keep going from 9 p.m. well past 1 a.m., and by the end of it, Ron is in crisis. It's abundantly clear that she's the weakest link. Mizaki and Kaede head off to bed, and Ron pretends to do the same before returning to the practice room. If her group members knew how much she was struggling, she might end up distracting them with concern for the concert. She faces herself in the mirror with criticism. I'm still nowhere near good enough yet. And as she trains, she repeats her convictions. I can't let Mizaki and Kaede's expectations of me down. I'll show them how bright I can shine. But words alone can't make up the difference, and she collapses. Furious, she turns to herself again. Is this all you've got? Eventually, Ron has to stop training to go to work. It's not even clear if she gets any sleep beforehand. As TriStar waits in their green room, she sits alone in a haze of exhaustion. But as soon as the call to standby comes, she jumps up with everyone else. Every fiber of her being is tuned to this upcoming performance. As expected, Mizaki tells them that every seat in the stadium has sold out. Let's shine so brightly that they'll never forget, she declares, and for Ron it might as well be a battle cry. She uses everything she has to pull off the concert, and everything goes smoothly. Afterwards, Ron can hardly celebrate with Mizaki and Kaede. They're so relaxed and talk about it so casually, as if this was just a normal situation for them. Ron is too exhausted to even pretend that she's on the same wavelength, and she doesn't follow them back into the green room. Instead, she sits in a hallway and broods over her own shortcomings. I may have been able to get by today without causing them any trouble or messing up, but I was right on the line. I'm not good enough. I'm not... Before Ron can finish her thought, she's interrupted by her manager. She has a gift from Ichigo and Aoi, and Ron immediately perks up. Her friends have both written her encouraging letters, and reading them reminds her to check Ichigo's text from the previous day. It's a ring of hearts around the words, "You can do it." I can do it, huh? Ron muses, and then is hit by a flood of memories. There certainly was a time when it felt like she could do anything. She eats some of the snacks they sent her and finally starts to calm down. When had she started feeling so tired? Ron decides to start getting more rest from that point on. Training as hard as she did for the concert wasn't sustainable, and there weren't any other surprises on the horizon. She must have lost her mind to neglect her health so badly. So now, instead of keeping up with Mizaki and Kaede, Ron puts on her headphones and tries to take naps between jobs. She's doing just that when Mizaki gets her attention and shows her a news broadcast. Ichigo and Aoi are on screen talking about their new duo unit. It's amazing news, and of course Ron feels proud of them. But when she thinks about how happy they must be to debut together, she can't muster much excitement. An aching feeling blooms in her stomach instead. Because her reaction was so subdued, Ron tries to correct it. She pulls up pictures of Ichigo and Aoi from their spring break trip, and reminds herself of how much she loves her friends, and how much they still love her. It's wonderful that they've all found so much success while supporting each other. But as soon as she puts her phone down, the happy feeling leaves again. Ron waits for another text from Ichigo and Aoi all day. Surely they must be excited to tell her about it, but the longer she waits, the worse she feels. Oh well, guess they're busy too, she tells herself. It's not like she'd had time to message them after all. This is just how things will be from now on. It's that thought of an empty, silent future that suddenly scares her. What is this feeling? But she has to get back to work, so she doesn't have time to dwell on it. TriStar spends the whole night shooting a music video, and Ron checks her phone as soon as they're done in the morning. There's a message from Ichigo. Dear Ron, it reads, we came up with a unit name. Before we announced it, we wanted to make sure you were the first to hear. And that name is Soleil. What do you think? Ron feels happy for a moment as she answers. I give my seal of approval. It's the perfect name for you two. And then it's gone. You two, she mutters and presses send. They really are on different paths now. Ron is distracted for the rest of the day, so much that Mizuki notices and checks on her. I am fine, Ron reassures her, but Mizuki is clearly upset. Am I just hallucinating that look on your face then? Mizuki walks away before Ron can answer, and Kaede makes a feeble effort to ease the tension. Ron has clearly messed up. That should be the concerning part, but Ron is more concerned to realize that she's struggling to care. As they head to their next job, Ron can hardly focus on anything. She should be disciplining herself, or resting, or preparing for their next stop. Anything to resolve the discomfort she'd caused her group members. But as if she'd become detached from herself, she can only wonder why everything feels so wrong. Taking action feels far beyond her. That is until Mizuki lets her know that Ichigo and Aoi will be working nearby. She suggests that if they finish work early, Ron will be able to visit them and congratulate them on their debut. It's all Ron can think about while they film their music show performance. And to her horror, Ron makes her first professional mistake. The first one in a long, long time. That snaps her back to reality. The performance has to be reshot, and Ron apologizes profusely to Mizuki afterwards. It's not like you to make a mistake, Mizuki scolds, and even when Kaede tells her not to worry about it, she's mortified. But somehow, as if she really had lost her mind, Ron wonders if there's still time for her to see Ichigo and Aoi. Even though they're now late for their next job, even though everyone must surely be sick of her by now, it couldn't be that much worse to at least go see her friends for a few minutes. Ron runs to the studio they were meant to be filming in, but their set is already being taken down. Ichigo and Aoi are gone. A staff member approaches her and gives her another gift they've left for her. Ron forgets all about TriStar in that moment. She returns to the green room with the gift and opens it immediately. They've made her another energy drink and written her a letter. We know you're really busy, so do your best. Ron tastes the energy drink, which is awful, and can picture Ichigo and Aoi making it together. Just the idea of it collapses the last of her resolve. If she hadn't messed up, she could have seen them. Instead, all she has is her imagination. It's pathetic. Ron breaks down crying before she remembers that she's late and rushes back to her group. They're all waiting for her in front of the van and she apologizes. Honoka tells them that they're half an hour late, and Mizuki looks more upset than ever as they start their commute. Ron has to say something. She's been extremely disrespectful to not just Mizuki, but their whole staff. She starts with Mizuki and apologizes again, but Mizuki only has more criticism. You don't have to apologize. It's not like you're doing this for me, right? Mizuki may be harsh, but she's right. All she had ever asked of Ron was her professionalism and independence. Ron was supposed to be in TriStar for her own benefit. She was supposed to be shining alone, regardless of whoever stood next to her. And Ron had promised to transform and shine and prove herself to everyone. So how had she gotten it in her head that Mizuki was personally upset with her? Why did she care so much that TriStar's group dynamic was tense and cold? Why couldn't she just be professional about it all? When they get to their hotel, Ron stares at the gift from Ichigo and Aoi and tries to find an answer. I wonder when it started. I wasn't like this before. She considers their letter again. Do your best, huh? It wasn't that long ago that we were joining hands and saying, let's do our best. It all hits her then. I miss them. I want to see Ichigo and Aoi. Ron decides to message them right then to arrange a visit, but stops herself. The next day is their debut concert, and it'd be selfish of her to distract them. But at that moment, she receives a text from Mizuki instead. The text reads, "Dear Ron, I've decided. I don't want to rain on your heart any longer. I'm removing you from TriStar. You deserve to be able to shine under the sun. I nearly tossed your dream aside to accomplish my own. I'm sorry. I'll always be watching you from the night sky. Even if our paths differ, let's both shine together in the same sky." Although the blunt rejection had shocked her at first, the rest of the message convinces Ron that she misjudged Mizuki. Rather than coldly valuing her only for her professional skill set, it turns out that Mizuki did care about her feelings after all, enough to sacrifice her own highly successful unit on Ron's behalf. And although the debt she'll owe Mizuki for this sacrifice is unimaginable, she still feels instant relief. With her responsibility to TriStar removed, there's nothing that can stop her from returning to her friends. Like a rubber band snapping back into place, she rushes back to the path she'd been on in those fateful days before she joined TriStar. The next morning, Ron wastes no time in leaving TriStar's hotel and racing to Ichigo and Aoi's debut concert, the Soleil debut concert. She gets there in the middle of their press conference and climbs up on stage. Driven by madness or passion or love, whatever you wanted to call it, it propelled her directly into the arms of her best friends, in front of all of the reporters, their fans, and their teachers. Ichigo and Aoi ask her what's going on, and she tells them that she quit TriStar. It's not the whole truth, but it's how she feels. She might as well have quit a long time ago. Seized by catharsis, Ron turns to the reporters and makes the same announcement. I, Shibuki Ron, have dropped out of TriStar. She turns back to her friends. It's because we're together that I can run my hardest. All kinds of logistical questions burst from the crowd in front of them, but no one can stop Ron from going backstage and preparing to perform with Soleil. They teach her the song quickly, and a costume is acquired. And then she's doing another wonderful group cheer and debuting as a member of Soleil. Somehow, it all just works, as if it was meant to be. After they perform, Ichigo and Aoi thank Ron for making it to the concert, and Ron thanks them in return. With her mind finally clearing, she thinks of Mizuki and starts to get emotional. It's because of Mizuki that Ron feels so much happiness now, and it's because of Ron that Mizuki must surely be feeling some kind of regret. It'll take a lifetime of effort to make the most of the opportunity that Mizuki has given her. As she starts to tear up with gratitude for how kind everyone has been to her, Aoi offers her some encouragement. Let's all work together so we can outshine even Mizuki. That's a good first step. Let's, Ron agrees. From now on, the three of us will always shine together. And when they all join hands and say, let's do our best, Ron is overjoyed. Although Soleil's debut is successful and they manage to escape any potential fan backlash, Ron's happy ending is clouded by guilt. But there's not much she can do to resolve it, so she's forced to move forward. She and Aoi agree to make Ichigo their leader, mostly on the basis of Ichigo's natural talent as an idol. She's so popular that her instincts are sure to lead them in the right direction. Ichigo stumbles a bit in the role at first, but Aoi and Ron do their best to support her. And soon enough, she's gotten the hang of it. That's a super idol for you. While Soleil are figuring out their next steps, Ron runs into Mizuki back at school. TriStar has gone on a hiatus while they find Ron's replacement, and Ron isn't sure what to expect from Mizuki. She hesitates to greet her, but Mizuki gives her a compliment. "Ron, you're so bright right now. I mean it." Reassured, Ron thanks her. Soleil and TriStar are rivals, Mizuki continues. Let's aim for greater heights together. Mizuki goes on to say that she's decided on TriStar's new member already, and Ron takes the opportunity to repay some of her debt. She asks if she can pass on her TriStar costume to the new member personally, and Mizuki tells her that it's Eureka. The three TriStar members are headed to a press conference to announce the new lineup right away, so Ron returns to Ichigo and Aoi's dorm to watch it. Eureka is a perfect fit, and Ron is happy to see how much stronger she's become since they first met. TriStar then announces that they'll be holding a joint concert with Soleil, and although they hadn't been asked beforehand, the Soleil members are all excited for the opportunity. There's nothing they can't handle now that they're all back together. That night, before TriStar leaves again, Ron finds Eureka to give her her TriStar costume. She sits down next to Eureka under the moonlight, and for once Eureka's vampire character has disappeared. "I'm so excited, I still can't believe I was chosen," she confesses, and Ron is glad to see her be honest for once. She hands over the costume and tells Eureka to show her the best performance she can. So this time when Eureka exclaims, "My power is at its peak, the blood of the Moon King runs through my veins," Ron gives her a pass. She could use all the power she can get. The joint concert goes perfectly the next day, and after only one more Soleil concert, they're already being asked to put their summer plans on hold for a new project, a national tour arranged by headmistress Orihime. Only this time, they'll be joining TriStar and the independent unit Poapoa Purin as a combined group called Star Anise. And as exciting as that opportunity is, it's a familiar enough experience for Ron. It's fun seeing her friends get excited though, so she puts most of her focus on them. Aside from nearly getting the first leg of their tour cancelled due to a typhoon, the Star Anise tour goes smoothly for Ron. She feels a little bad for how awkward Mizuki seems to be around everyone, but Mizuki settles in quickly and everyone ends up getting along. It's a fun summer, and Orihime surprises them by booking them a private cruise with their fans as the final leg of the tour. Ichigo is sad about it ending, but Ron and Aoi do their best to cheer her up. And when they eventually get back to school, Ron is eager to get back to their Soleil promotions. Before they can resume work though, the Starlight Queen Cup is announced. It's an annual school competition to decide the top student, and Mizuki has been the Starlight Queen for 2 years running. Only the top 8 idols are eligible to compete, and the 8 Star Anise members fill those spots. Mizuki personally challenges them all to defeat her. Competition has found them once again. Regardless of her feelings toward the Starlight Queen title itself, Ron is very motivated to follow in Mizuki's footsteps. She'd always viewed Mizuki as a role model, but their experiences together in TriStar and then Star Anise have convinced her that Mizuki has a good heart as well as a strong mind. The Soleil members end up getting special Mizuki-style training and personal advice from Mizuki herself ahead of the competition, and Ron puts in her full effort, especially once they find out that Mizuki is working through illness in the days leading up to it. Ron's respect for her only grows. But just as Ron had narrowed her focus to the Starlight Queen Cup, she's distracted again. And for a good reason this time. Spicy Agaha is preparing to hold another representative model audition, and she recognizes it as a chance to test her progress. I may have failed last time, but I really want to make it now, she tells Ichigo and Aoi, and their encouragement inspires her to be confident in her chances. Surely she's found a perspective worth chasing after all she's been through in the past year. Ron is working on her application to the audition on the night before the Starlight Queen Cup when she's visited by Ichigo. But as soon as Ichigo sits down and starts talking, Ron can tell that something is wrong. She sounds hesitant, almost nervous. I've been thinking too, about what I should do from now on. Something like Aoi's acting or your modeling. I want to figure out what I should focus on in order to shine even more. Ah, that was a familiar sentiment. The two of them had begun their friendship with Ron sharing what she knew of the industry, so it's only fitting that she share what she's learned since then in this moment. The path to becoming a star isn't something other people can show you, Ron tells her. Finding your own road to brilliance is your job as an idol. Ichigo still has doubts, so Ron keeps going. Don't overlook everything you've done to get here. Don't you think there are plenty of hints among what you've experienced so far? Ichigo leaves, hopefully feeling a little better, and Ron finishes her application. The next morning, it's time for the Starlight Queen Cup, where Ichigo breaks the tension easily as usual. Even though they all want to win, they each have plenty of opportunities awaiting them regardless of the outcome. Not even their school's highest level of competition could test their friendships. They all go on stage together, minus Mizuki, who is allowed to choose her challenger for the final round. And when they're waiting for the result, Ichigo reaches out and holds Ron's hand. It only feels right that Ichigo is then chosen as the finalist. Aoi runs off to prepare a celebratory parfait for Ichigo, her favorite food, and when Ichigo and Ron finally catch up with her, Ron notices that something is off. She can't put her finger on it, so she lets the arrival of the rest of their friends distract them. Soon enough, though, Ichigo announces that she's leaving Starlight Academy. Ron is concerned at first, and then shocked when she explains that she's going to America. She'd taken Ron's advice seriously, and wants to find her own path to her own goals. But Ichigo has always been the type to act on her feelings right away, so Ron suspects that there is more to this announcement. She asks when Ichigo is leaving, and sure enough, she'll be headed overseas as soon as the Starlight Queen Cup is over, in just a short 24 hours. Although it's not the outcome she would have wished for, Ron has to respect Ichigo's drive. She thought things through seriously and is ready to take action. How could Ron hold that against her? Amidst everyone's encouraging comments, Ron notices that Aoi is struggling. She's never been through anything like this before, and she's clearly upset. Still, Ron can tell that Aoi is doing her best to be supportive, so she decides to do her best to support Aoi in turn. If anyone knew what she was going through, it was Ron. The next day, Ichigo ends up losing the Starlight Queen Cup by a tiny margin. But it hardly matters, because she's already packed to leave. Aoi and Ron both get invited to join Ichigo's farewell performance, and then they take her straight to the airport. Watching Aoi and Ichigo cope with their imminent separation is hard, but Ron gives them space. The experience is a lot more raw for both of them. And when it's finally time to say goodbye at the airport, Ron makes sure that Aoi doesn't miss her chance to express her feelings. The two childhood friends cry and hug, and Ron almost cries too. Luckily, the rest of their friends arrive and help them all cheer up. Our feelings will always connect us, Ron assures them, and then Ichigo leaves. When they all get back to school, it turns out that Mizuki has left as well. With their two most popular students gone, Starlight Academy becomes quieter than Ron had ever seen it. Her friend Hitomi becomes the new Starlight Queen, and Ron makes a vow with everyone else to work harder than ever. But rumors of a new idol school holding entrance exams creates an uneasy atmosphere anyway. And when Dream Academy opens in the spring, Ron isn't alone in feeling uncertain about the future. She still has the Spicy Agaha representative model audition to look forward to though, so Ron focuses on her training as much as possible. She spends plenty of time with Aoi and all of their friends, and gains a new source of strength when she discovers a new hobby. A newly released mascot character named Ebipon catches her attention. It's a little tanuki themed around hot springs, which is another one of Ron's long-term interests. Ebipon is silly, cute, and has a lot of merchandise to collect. And with so much pressure in the industry, Ron decides that she could use that kind of levity. After months of training, the Spicy Agaha representative model audition finally arrives. And this time, she wins! Anna presents her with a bouquet of flowers on stage and tells her, "Let's bring fire to the Spicy Agaha brand together." Ron is officially named as a representative model for the brand and Anna's new muse. Her work therefore begins to revolve around Spicy Agaha specifically, as she's usually busy with their photo shoots and runway shows. Ron feels pretty lucky that she's managed to achieve such a secure position in the industry, especially since Dream Academy's new idols are a massive hit with the public. So much so that even Aoi is a fan of them, no matter how often Ron reminds her that they need to take the threat seriously. Starlight Academy has no Mizuki, no Ichigo, no TriStar, no Soleil, and no Star Anise. Only Popo Purin, who are famous for essentially doing nothing. And it's not exactly a reassuring picture compared to the Dream Academy hype. Still, Starlight Academy decides to play into the emerging rivalry with a face-off concert against Dream Academy. Aoi is chosen by Headmistress Orihime to represent Starlight, and Ron sees it as a great opportunity for her. At least until they accidentally find out that Orihime is planning to resign if Aoi loses. Ron has always known Aoi to be an anxious person, so she immediately starts trying to keep her focused. And it seems to be working until they finally meet Aoi's opponent, a brand new Dream Academy student named Seira. Seira had actually approached them before, but none of them had known who she was at the time, so Ron had dismissed her completely. Seira seems nice at first, but she proves herself to be very arrogant when she challenges Aoi with a statement of blanket superiority. Ron gets defensive on Aoi's behalf. It was unfair for Seira to make such baseless comparisons, especially when they'd only just met. But Seira does back up her claims when she performs in the Face-Off concert. It's her debut stage, her first time ever performing as an idol, and she pulls off a constellation appeal. A brand new technique no one in the industry has ever seen before. It's a really incredible accomplishment, and Ron gets even more worried about Aoi's mental condition. She hasn't been in a great place since Ichigo left. The last thing she needs is more pressure. The next day, when Aoi's turn to perform arrives, Ron does her best to keep her away from all the negative media coverage about Starlight Academy's chances. But even with all of their friends gathered in the green room for support, Aoi still seems very demoralized. It's only the surprise appearance of Ichigo that distracts her for a moment. Ron is excited to see Ichigo again, and she and Aoi both welcome her back with a hug. But the mood is dampened by Aoi's call to go on standby, and then ruined completely by Seira and her student producer, Ki, bursting into the room and causing a commotion. Seira challenges Ichigo to pull off the same constellation appeal as she did, and Ron is shocked by Ichigo's confidence in accepting it. But she's also very concerned about Aoi's feelings in all of this. There's no way any of this is making her feel better. Sure enough, Aoi insists on letting Ichigo take her place as school representative. She and Ron return to the audience to watch the show and are both impressed by Ichigo's progress. She pulls off the constellation appeal no problem, even though everyone else still finds it extremely intimidating. And when Orihime finds Aoi for a talk, Ron feels even more sorry for her. With Ichigo back at Starlight Academy and full of crazy stories about her year in America, a significant gap appears in the idol industry. Where there used to be only Mizuki running far ahead of everyone else, Ichigo and Seira appeared in that role practically overnight. There had still been no sign of Mizuki since she left school, so suddenly everyone had a brand new set of role models to chase after. It was a weird feeling for Ron to have one of them as a best friend. Ichigo leads her and Aoi on a mission to investigate Dream Academy's campus, and the trip only confirms Ron's concerns. The Dream Academy students use advanced technology as well as a more diverse range of courses to strengthen their activity. Unlike at Starlight, where failure to compete is failure as an idol, the Dream Academy students can still pursue production and design. That's a major reason why they're so popular, and it's not something that Starlight students can easily emulate. Ichigo ends up working more closely with Seira as they compete for opportunities, and soon Ron and Aoi get a chance to join in. They're all preparing for a special fan photography event, and the Soleil members run into Seira and Ki while gathering material in town. Although Ron had gotten a poor first impression of their Driako rivals, she'd seen how much Ichigo likes them and gives them another chance. The 5 girls all hang out and are friends by the end of the day. Soleil's first return performance as a trio is just the icing on the cake. This new friendship with Ki and Seira takes an awkward turn when a huge fuss is raised over Seira's public image. She has a cool and competitive side, which is very obvious at first. And she also has a softer, cuter, animal-loving side. Aoi and Ki go as far as getting an entire article published about it to avoid potential scandals. And even though everyone seems to conclude that it's great for Seira to be so well-rounded, the same logic turns out not to apply to Ron. Part of it is her own fault. When Ron started collecting Ebipom merchandise, she didn't tell anyone about it. It didn't seem important enough to mention, and maybe a small part of her was embarrassed to have such a childish interest. She keeps her collection hidden in her closet, and hopes no one notices the Ebipom phone charm she keeps with her for good luck. But after seeing how open everyone was about Seira's unexpected interest, Ron starts to feel like she might be able to open up a little more. And her friends' conversation about their favorite mascot character seems like the perfect opportunity. She's about to admit that she likes Ebipom when they all start freaking out about how weird it would be if she were interested in them, because she's too cool and mature or something like that. Ron decides not to say anything, maybe it was kind of embarrassing after all. Plus, she ends up having to go to work, so there's no point dwelling on it. She heads off to her meeting with Anna, where she's introduced to Spicy Agaha's first constellation dress. Anna has designed it specifically for her, and wants her to perform a constellation appeal with it in an upcoming fashion show. Of course Ron agrees, but she still has some reservations. Actually pulling off the appeal requires a very high level of skill, and it's not something you can really train for, so she'll just have to give it her best on the day of. The pressure is intense enough that Ron starts having nightmares about messing up and losing her position at Spicy Agaha. And when she's worried that she's losing sleep, she turns to her Ebipom collection. This is why she bought so much merchandise after all. Looking at her favorite character never fails to calm her down. She's able to go back to sleep holding one of her favorite plush toys and wakes up bright and early the next morning for a magazine interview. The interview is pretty normal, and the magazine is very prestigious, so Ron has a good time answering their questions. And at the end of it, she gets a delivery for a giant Ebipom plush. It's a contest prize that she didn't expect to win, so she accepts it enthusiastically. She's so happy with how well the day has gone that she completely forgets her worries about her image and her upcoming performance. When Ichigo and Aoi ask her if she's an Ebipom fan, she tells them all about her secret hobby. After that, there's a small amount of media coverage about Ron's Ebipom fan status, and she's genuinely relieved to get the whole issue off of her mind. She goes into her Spicy Agaha performance with her confidence boosted, and she's able to pull off the constellation appeal that Anna requested. And with her success, her friends don't have any other negative comments about her and Ebipom. She even gets a new job as Ebipom's public relations representative model. It's as perfect an outcome as she could have asked for. Even after that string of successes, Ron still faces another loss when she tries another acting audition. It's for a drama that Aoi is working on, and she hadn't really had her hopes up in the first place. She'd been paired with Eureka again, and of course Ron ended up distracted by her vampire act. Somehow, Eureka needed saving in this audition too. Needless to say, neither of them pass. As fall and winter come and go, Ron takes a passive interest in one of the Dream Academy idols, Kazesawa Sora. She launches her own fashion brand, and Ron thinks it's pretty cool. Ron even gets to meet her at a joint Starlight Driaka Christmas party, and Sora turns out to be very nice. They then get to work together during filming for a special New Year's broadcast, and Ron is happy for the opportunity. Sora is clearly a very talented person who she can't wait to learn from. The filming also brings rumors of Mizuki, and Ron helps Ichigo and Aoi look for her in the studio. Sure enough, Ichigo tracks her down and Aoi and Ron join them to catch up. Mizuki says she's working as an advisor at Dream Academy and is full of cryptic hints about her plans. Eventually, she does come around to Ichigo's friendliness, and it seems like she has good intentions. Ron is just happy to know that she's still working hard behind the scenes. The New Year's broadcast wraps up without any further incident, and Ron enjoys the time she spends with Sora. She doesn't end up seeing Sora again until the following month, when the two of them are both contestants in an ehomaki competition. Ehomaki is a seasonal sushi roll meant to be eaten during Setsuban, a February holiday. The competition will award one winner a collaboration with a popular ehomaki producer. One of the rounds involves making your own, so Ron plans to make hers using the healthiest possible ingredients. But during her preparations, a different event gives her some doubts about her strategy. She participates in a homemade snack fair for idols, and her healthy cookies seem to disappoint her fans. Even though she got the reaction she wanted, it's undeniable that everyone else seemed to be having a lot more fun. So Ron asks Ichigo and Aoi for their advice, and she tests a different ehomaki recipe on them. As expected, they're a lot more excited when she uses trendier flavors. This creates a really difficult situation for Ron. Sure, she loves her healthy foods, and she believes in her grandmother's philosophy of caring for others through healthy meals. She'd love to be able to continue expressing her care for others with recipes that she genuinely believes are helping people. But if even her fans don't share her values, then what are the odds that the judges in the competition will? Ron is still puzzling over what to do during a film shoot in the mountains with Ichigo and Aoi. She gets lost in the woods while distracted and wanders far away from their camp. In a chance encounter, she runs into Sora, who is also lost. The two of them decide to find some shelter to rest, and Sora explains that she was looking for inspiration for the competition. Since Ron is hungry, Sora even makes her very own ehomaki using foraged ingredients. It's the same recipe Sora is planning to compete with. Ron is impressed by how unique Sora's creation is, so Sora gives her some advice. Everyone freely rolls their own ehomaki. There is no one correct way. That's why the cord you put together should be one you believe in. And sure enough, Sora's creation tastes great, even though there's nothing trendy about it. Ichigo and Aoi then come to the rescue and bring them both back to town. When they finally enter the competition, Sora and Ron make it all the way to the final round, the ehomaki recipe round. Inspired by Sora, Ron decides to stick to her own values and uses her healthy ingredients. But as she feared, her ehomaki is initially dismissed by the judges for being too plain. Only one of them recognizes the caring intentions behind her choices. Luckily, they're much more impressed by the nostalgic flavor, and Ron ends up winning alongside Sora. Ron thanks her for her advice, but Sora dismisses her gratitude. It was your own strength that let your true self shine through. After they finish their collaboration in the Setsubun promotions, Ron continues to get to know the Dream Academy students along with all of her friends. And when she finds out that she isn't eligible for an acting audition she'd been excited about, she's happy to use her training to help the Drieka idols pass it instead. She even gives Aoi her lucky Epiponpon charm when Aoi is struggling with her own Constellation Appeal challenge. In only a couple more months, middle school graduation is upon them. After an emotional ceremony, Ron is officially a high school student, and Soleil's very first job comes directly from Headmistress Orihime. They're assigned to judge the middle school's audition caravan, a special transfer exam held across multiple locations. There are only a handful of spots available, so Ron makes sure to take the evaluation seriously. As harsh as the process is, she's happy with the experience overall. They even find a new protege for Ichigo. Ron and her friends also find out what Mizuki's been up to for the past year and a half. After a typical cryptic invitation from the top idol herself, they track down Mizuki's new agency building and discover her new unit partner, Natsuki Mikuro. Despite Mikuro being entirely unknown in the entertainment industry, Mizuki seems to treat her as an equal. That alone is reason enough for Ron to take her seriously. And when their unit, Double M, debuts, Ron recognizes the threat they pose to the popularity of Starlight and Dream Academy. Double M happened to debut just in time for the revival of a new idol tournament, the Partners Cup. It is a competition to crown the best duo unit, meant to encourage collaboration between the two major idol schools. But it is open to the public as well, so Double M immediately announced their participation. Ron's group of friends are all participating as well, so they quickly begin choosing partners amongst themselves. Ron doesn't have anyone in particular in mind for her unit, so she goes along with Aoi and Ki's compatibility exercises. And perhaps unsurprisingly, she gets along best with Sora. They all agree to write their choice of partner down as part of the exercise, and Ron is happy when she and Sora are paired together after all. It gets a little complicated when Eureka says that she had written one of their names down and runs off with Kaide, but everything seems to smooth itself out by the end of the day. The partners all have a couple of weeks to practice, and Ron is very excited to work more closely with Sora. They're both interested in trying something new together, so Ron lets Sora take over their styling. On the day of the Partners Cup, they start off a little nervous, but quickly find distraction in their friends. Sora is so relaxed that Ron has to compliment her on it, and she's flattered by Sora's earnest response. "I can't help it, I really am excited to go on with you." When they finally perform together, Sora makes a small mistake in their choreography, but Ron is able to cover for her, and afterwards she's too happy to think anything of it. "Were you really not nervous?" Ichigo asks her, and Ron is surprised too. "Somehow no, it's because I was with Sora." Sora fires back with even more compliments. Ron looks cool on the outside, but she's really quite charming. I fell for her on stage. I was overjoyed to be able to perform with her again. The conversation is interrupted by Seira and Ki, but Ron keeps talking with Sora anyway. And even after they watch Ichigo and Seira's clothing performance, the two of them are still a little distracted by each other. The next time they see each other is a few weeks later, when they're both invited to audition for a drama based on Aladdin and the Magic Lamp. It's called Rhapsody of the Desert Moon, and Ron is invited to try out for the swordsman role, while Sora will be trying out for the princess. This opportunity could hardly be more perfect for Ron. Her consistent string of acting failures has only fed her determination to finally land a role. She'd been particularly interested in action projects, so the genre of this drama seems like a perfect fit. And to top it all off, Sora will be auditioning with her. With even more encouragement from Ichigo and Aoi, Ron resolves to do everything she can to pass. Since Ron doesn't have much experience with swordsmanship, she decides to focus her efforts there. Headmistress Orihime gets her a lesson with an accomplished stunt trainer, but their session time is very limited. Ron is able to pick up and correct most of his feedback points right away, but she's still struggling with the actual fight scenes by the end of the session. Surprise attacks in particular are difficult for her to stay in character for. In order to overcome this weakness, Ron has her friends attack her non-stop around school on the remaining day before the audition. She only takes a break when Sora visits to drop off the costume she's designed for her. It looks incredible, and Ron is very grateful for the effort she's clearly put into it. But when she sees Sora's costume at the audition the next day, she's a little surprised by how casual it looks. "I'm not sure what to say. I was expecting something frillier," she admits, and Sora explains. "I was thinking about how cool you'd look as a swordswoman. That's when I got the idea of being a princess who looked up to that gallant figure. Wouldn't someone like that want to get even just a bit closer to her object of adoration?" Ron isn't sure what to say. She's used to being teased by her friends and is usually uncomfortable with such dramatic praise. But Sora has been nothing but sincere in all of their interactions. Ron can't find any trace of sarcasm or irony or arrogance, just her honest feelings. And that makes Ron feel flustered for a different reason than usual. "Well, if that's how you feel," she starts, and Sora smiles back at her. Then they're interrupted by the director. The audition goes about as well as Ron could have expected until Sora deviates from the script. Acting as the princess, she leaps into action to defend the swordswoman, and Ron is confused. This scene wasn't in the script, she worries, but Sora is undeterred. "I want to get closer to the object of my adoration. My ideal princess doesn't just watch as she's protected. She fights as well." Sora hadn't had any time for stunt training, but she still goes for the fight scene anyway. And as Ron watches her, she immediately starts to regret how limited her view of Sora's role had been. "I've never even imagined a princess like that," she says apologetically, and Sora seems worried for the first time. "You don't like it?" Ron responds by getting back into character and takes hold of the sword along with her. "I really like it a lot." The two of them improvise a scene where they use the sword together, and then Ron takes over for the final scripted scene. Luckily, the director loves their performances, and they both are cast in the drama. After an uneventful filming period, Ron finally has her name in a film's credits for the first time since she was a little kid. It had taken a lot of auditions and a refusal to give up, but she was happy that her victory finally occurred alongside someone who was quickly becoming a very close friend. Even though she'd been happy to return to acting, Ron is still primarily occupied with her Spicy Agaha responsibilities. So much so that when Soleil receives a challenge from Double M for a special face-off concert, Ron doubts that they'll have enough time to make the competition worthwhile. If they're all too busy to practice, is there any hope of winning? Ichigo does manage to persuade her and Aoi though, so they accept the challenge. And Ron is glad they did, because even without much time to prepare, it ends up being a lot of fun. They'd wanted to win, of course, but even after a loss to Double M, the experience convinces them to keep looking for opportunities to revive their unit. Those plans will have to wait though, because the Aikatsu election is right around the corner. Similar to their Star Anise tour 2 years ago, Aikatsu is planned to be an 8-member idol group voted in by the public. The winners will go on a summer-long concert tour across Japan. And as fun as that sounds, Ron doesn't really believe she has a chance of getting in. Ron had only been in 12th place in the overall idol rankings before Double M debuted, and Mikuru successfully bumped her to 13th. She's number 1 in the model rankings, but her activities with Spicy Agaha haven't left much time for other idol work. Ron still campaigns for the election along with everyone else, but she's not surprised when she doesn't get in. Besides, she'll be busy enough mentoring younger models at Spicy Agaha's fashion shows that summer. Ron, Aoi, and Ichigo all split up for their separate summer jobs, and reunite back at school in the fall. Ichigo had gotten into Aikatsu 8, so she returns with a wild plan to overtake Mizuki and Double M by that September. She wants to see the future of Aikatsu, an idea planted in her head by Mizuki herself, of course. As if it were meant to be, Ichigo gets an opportunity to do just that when she's chosen for the Twinkle Star Cup. It's another showdown concert organized by Mizuki, but it's more massive in scale than any previous competition. Mizuki's criteria is very specific. She wants Double M to face a unit made of 1 student from Starlight Academy and 1 student from Dream Academy. The winner will be crowned Japan's definitive best idol unit. And with Aoi and Ki in charge of picking representatives, Ichigo and Seira end up as their challengers. Ran is too busy with work to be very involved, but Aoi and Ichigo put a lot of effort into it, and she does her best to support them. Even with everything going on, Ran does get another acting gig, a small role as a mysterious spy in one of Aoi's police dramas. They have to go overseas to film it, and she's very excited for the opportunity. It's nice having Aoi there for support too. When they get back, the Twinkle Star Cup continues to receive a ton of public interest and gets a ton of media coverage to match, especially after Double M announced that they'll be disbanding afterwards regardless of the outcome. The announcement arrives 2 days before the competition, so Ran is initially worried that it will distract Ichigo and Seira. Surely they must be nervous about such a massive event, even more so now that it has extra emotional significance. But of course, they're unfazed. Ran should never have doubted them. And when they end up winning, Ran is immensely proud of them as well as Aoi and Ki. After such a massive milestone, high school begins to pass by in a blur. There is still plenty of spicy Agaha work, opportunities to help out at the middle school, and a scattered assortment of minor acting roles. Ichigo manages to surpass Mizuki in the idol rankings and become the official top idol, and it inspires the Soleil members to focus on the future. They love their activities together the most, so they resolve to keep their unit going as long as possible. After making a concerted effort to block out an entire summer in all of their schedules, Soleil gets the opportunity to go on their own national concert tour. But that's not all. They also plan to make it into that year's Aikatsu 8 group. And as a backup, even if they don't all make it in, they still organize a Starlight Academy event to determine the best 3-person unit. They end up doing all 3 plans at once in classic chaotic Soleil fashion. National tour and Aikatsu 8 tour aside, Soleil are the most proud to win their own event. A ton of students participated and even sparked the unexpected return of TriStar. Feeling like they've successfully reinvigorated the industry, Ran looks forward to even more accomplishments alongside her best friends. Soon enough though, the trio have to make another difficult decision. Graduation is coming up, and Aoi's ambitions will take her overseas to study abroad for the next 4 years. Ran is proud of her for being so brave, and has no problem with putting Soleil on hiatus until she gets back. In fact, it inspires her to take a more ambitious look at her own future. She had already reached the top of her field as a spicy Agaha muse, and Soleil had allowed her to top the charts as an idol. The only skill she still felt lacking in was her acting. Even though she'd started as an actress when she was a tiny baby, she could hardly claim those early years as a personal accomplishment. No, the measure of her acting skills was in her repeated failures throughout middle school. It had taken a director who was specifically interested in her and Sora's Partners Cup performance to give her a foot in the door. And from there she might as well thank her relationship with Aoi and her Starlight Academy connections for her other minor roles. Ran loves modeling, and she loves her work with Spicy Agaha, but she still has the rest of her life to learn and grow, and she's ready for a new challenge. Modeling won't be an option for her whole life, but acting might be. And through acting, there will be so much more depth to explore in her performances and her training. Although she plans to keep up her previous work, she explains her new ambition to Ichigo and Aoi. I believe that modeling is all about being able to express an entire world in a single moment. Countless people have told me that just a single moment has cheered them up or given them courage. Some said I inspired them to dress up more, and others even wanted to be like me someday. I think that alone makes it worth doing. That's why I want to find some way to express myself even more deeply. I know it won't be an easy thing to accomplish. I'll give it my all. And someday, if even just one person calls me an actor, then I'll know that I've truly become one. Ichigo and Aoi are completely supportive of her new dream, and they all promise that one day they'll revive Soleil as their new selves. 6 months later, in the spring, their high school graduation arrives, and with it, a graduation concert. Soleil have had a special song written for the occasion called My Star Way. Before they perform it, they each give a speech to the stadium full of attendees. In hers, Ran reflects on how far she's come since she first started at Starlight Academy 12 years ago. I'm also having the time of my life. It really went by in a flash. And I don't mean just today. Everything that led up to this, every single day at Starlight, flew by before I knew it. Way back when I started, I thought I had it all figured out. The only reason that overconfident girl from back then is standing before you today is because of all the support you've given me. Headmistress Orihime, Johnny, our designers, and all the staff members who have helped us along. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you for paving our path with us and allowing us to shine. And of course, to Mizuki and our seniors, thank you for always being our guiding lights. And finally you, the fans who found us, cheered for us, and kept us warmly in your hearts. Thank you more than anything in the world. Graduation is the start of something new. I plan to challenge myself and try a lot of new things. I may not know what lies ahead, but I'm sure I'll be fine. I might not have any proof, but maybe it's out there. So look forward to what I have coming next. And once again, thank you. When the concert ends and Ron moves out of the dorms with all of her friends, they take Aoi directly to the airport. She's going to America just like Ichigo did all the way back in middle school. And although Ron and Ichigo will miss her over the next few years, they're at least able to move in together and start their time as roommates. As an independent adult, Ron is able to rely on her success in modeling to fund her acting ambitions. She takes classes and auditions and gets a few roles. But even a few years in, her full effort still hasn't been enough to land her a breakout performance. That's why when she's offered the lead role in a new play by a famous director, she puts everything she has into perfecting it. The director is demanding, but Ron understands that his harsh criticism comes from a genuine belief in her abilities. So she practices non-stop, falling back on the support of her friends for inspiration. It's time to break out of your shell, the director tells her one day. You've gained more than enough experience, now take flight. Gather up your courage. Ron agrees. She'd love nothing more than to be reborn once again. After months of rehearsals, the play finally debuts. Ron's performance is successful, and while we don't know for sure, we can hope that it's the launching point for the acting career she's been working so hard for. A few months later, in the beginning of summer, Soleil's long-awaited revival is finally visible on the horizon. Aoi returns from America and reunites with Ron and Ichigo at Starlight Academy, where they all renew their commitment to their shared dream. Ron's path toward her goals has taken many twists and turns, but here she finds her infinite well of motivation. Thanks to her friends, she's long since forgotten how bleak the world once looked. With love as much as discipline, she's found a softer way forward, and it's thanks to the synchronized hearts she once dismissed that hers will never beat alone again. Thank you so much for watching! Somehow I thought that this would be a short video and I was clearly wrong. Let me know your thoughts about Ron and how crazy it is that Starlight Academy has an elementary school in the comments below. Also keep an eye out for the Akari deep dive in January. Bye bye!
Good morning, Pom Pom Grip Camping Girl!